So welcome everyone again. We are starting with the first lecture of the conference, and the first speaker is Professor Nao Tsuchiya. He is a professor of psychology at Monash University in Australia. His scholarly interests lie at the intersection of consciousness, cognition, and neuroscience research. He conducts both neuroimaging and psychological experiments and subjects them to mathematical analysis. This has led him to publishing several papers on the relationship between attention and consciousness, which was also the focus of his PhD thesis at Caltech. He was awarded the William James Prize from Association for Scientific Studies of Consciousness and has also been an ARC Future Fellow in his initial years at Monash. His inclinations to raise complicated questions like whether consciousness is limited to humans or what's the relationship between consciousness and active cognition have generated interesting answers in several talks and podcasts that he has delivered over the years. And in today's lecture, he will be discussing the growing evidence for separate neural mechanisms of attention and consciousness. So that's all from my side, and I would request you to please take away and start the lecture.
Okay. Thanks for Vaishnavi for kind introduction, and also Ramesh for inviting me to this conference. So the title of my talk today is Growing Evidence for Separate Neural Mechanisms for Attention and Consciousness. And here's the talk outline. First, I'm going to go through the definition of the terms, attention and consciousness, both kind of controversial terms. And then I'll try to sort of outline the evidence for dissociation of consciousness and attention over the last 20 years or so. First, starting from quick review, and then in particular talk about the controversial topic of consciousness without attention, and then through several experiments, and then I'll also talk about the neural correlates of consciousness and or attention. Here I'll talk about mostly our recent study, and then future outlook. Here I've been proposing over the couple of years that to really understand the physical basis of consciousness, we need to understand the structure of consciousness and the brain. And here I say that attention manipulation can be a great manipulation or perturbation of the structure of both to understand the relationship between the consciousness and the brain. Okay, so let's start with the question: why are we interested in the relationship between attention and the consciousness? Okay, so the one possibility is that attention may be the key to understand the consciousness. So Mike Posner actually wrote this paper in '94 in PNS, and there it's almost like he was saying that if you understand attention, then pretty much you are done. You can understand the consciousness at the same time. And if this is true, then attention is indeed important to understand the consciousness and vice versa. However, there's completely different kind of view proposed by Peter Tse and other people. Basically, this type of view is that attention may be a confounding factor, or in the other way, consciousness could be a confounding factor to understand the other one. So from this viewpoint, we need to carefully control the study, control the attention to study consciousness. So these two viewpoints are quite opposite, and regardless of what the truth is, we need to understand the relationship between consciousness and attention to understand the neural base of each. And then how can we address if attention is similar to consciousness in one way or the other? That's the question. One potential way is to focus on the particular type of the dissociation. For example, without consciousness of something, without becoming aware of something, can we still attend to it? This is a case of no consciousness and attention. The other part is that without attention, can we see? That's the opposite kind of direction of a question. And then another type of the question could be that for a given percept or behavior, the effects of attention, the same as the effects of being conscious of. So here is the slightly more complicated kind of question, but using various behavior or neuronal kind of evidence to see whether the effects of attention similar or opposite of a consciousness. So that's the question. And I'll talk the latter two parts mainly in today's talk. First, the definition of terms. So according to Williams James, he already kind of isolated at least two important parts of the attention, which will be probably expanded throughout this conference. Everyone knows what attention is. It is taking position by the mind. It is in clear and vivid form of one out of what seems several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought. So this red part corresponds to, in sort of the modern terms, it's a selective amplification type of attention. And then also he goes, it implies withdrawal from some things in order to deal effectively with others. So this latter part, orange part, is more to do with a suppression, inhibition, or of the unwanted information. And these are already identified by William James. And naive intuition in terms of the consciousness and also attention could be summarized by this type of the scheme. So if you have some kind of stimulus that comes into your mind, you might imagine that within somewhere in the brain, the neural response gets evoked and it goes above threshold. And then if it's attended, it becomes really highly activated. And if it's not attended, it goes slightly activated and then dies out quickly. On the other hand, the stimulus that is too weak to activate the brain, then it doesn't probably pass the threshold, something like that. But I would argue today that some types of the neural mechanism of attention is likely to be this type of the amplification. But it's probably only one tiny aspect of the attention, how the attention is implemented in the brain. Like in this, idea, inhibition or many different kinds of attention is not there. And also, in terms of the consciousness, I would say that this is a highly problematic kind of idea, like threshold exceeding or not. It just explains consciousness. For example, just simply, this kind of idea never explains why we experience sound and vision in a different way, or touch and smell, or emotion, anything of different kind of a quality cannot be simply explained by this type of a threshold model. And I'll mention other alternative, but this type of the amplification kind of model is really unlikely to be any closer to the truth. That's my opinion, at least evidence supported by several evidences. Okay, so coming back to what is attention, more technically, I'm not going to talk about this attention in the sense of the alertness or arousal, but more to do with the selective attention. So one out of many types of selection. And in fact, among them, I also will not talk more or less about bottom-up or exogenous attention that is defined by the stimulus or stimulus relationship. Sometimes these are called stimulus-driven or automatic or task-independent type of attention. But my talk is mostly focused on top-down endogenous attention, something that seems to be highly related to consciousness. Okay, and I'm going to define consciousness later. And this type of the attention is usually volitionary controlled and task-dependent and goal-oriented. And this comes at at least 3 types or 4 types of the flavor, spatial, or feature, or object, or temporal-based type of attention. And then importantly, attention can, as I said, amplify the signal or neural activity, which result in amplified saliency in perception, or inhibit or unwanted signals, and so on. But the latter part is also less of the topic, center of the topic in this attention consciousness kind of debate. So mostly in the case of attention, I'm going to talk about top-down attentional amplification. Is it necessary for consciousness, or can it do the job without conscious seeing? And is it a similar kind of effect for the conscious seeing? That's the question, okay? So then the other side, what is consciousness? So consciousness comes at least two types. When you talk to a clinician, usually, what they immediately think about is a level of consciousness. Is this patient conscious, or is this anesthesia effective in killing consciousness, or something like that? But that's not what I'm talking about today. And it's a single moment of a unified experience, like conscious experience of a whole. That's also a bit too, big for today's talk. And it's more to do with the specific contents of consciousness. So sometimes people talk about it as a raw feeling or a qualia, or phenomenal consciousness, and not really the access consciousness. So here, in this case, what I'm talking about is that it is just as a raw feeling of seeing some aspect of the things. And in the case of the vision, then particular part of the visual field, a particular aspect. And this is nice demonstration that I always like to use in this kind of talk. This is the motion-induced blindness discovered by Yoram Bonnet. I hope that many of you have seen before. And if you have not seen, looking at the central cross without moving your eyes, I hope that you can start to feel like these yellow dots in the periphery start to fade away. And if you haven't done that, I'll encourage you to do that. And in addition, because this is an attention conference, I also want you to encourage to pay attention to one of the dots. Okay, without moving your eyes, center, and then paying attention to the left side of the dot or right side of the dot. If you do that, and if you are more or less, normal, if you have a normal brain, more or less, then what I would expect, especially if you can replicate this effect, is that the attended side of the dots probably disappear faster and also longer. And there is lots of report like this, but this is going to be a key for my second part of the talk. So attention in this case, counterintuitive to you, who thinks attention always amplifies signal, makes things disappear, okay? So let's move on. So that already, this motion-induced blindness, if you believe what I said, it is already kind of, implicating the dissociation of consciousness and attention, but let's go further. So this is a three question that I described, and then let's go to the first one. So to think about the dissociation between consciousness and top-down attention, I proposed this type of 2x2 table with Christoph Koch more than 10 years ago. So here the column is divided into whether necessarily give rise to consciousness or not. And then the row is divided by can occur or cannot occur without top-down attentional amplification. And then less controversial thing is non-dissociation pattern on the bottom right. For example, working memory and the detection and the discrimination of unexpected or unfamiliar stimuli, and things that comes with a full reportability or a global strong integration. All these kind of things tend to come with things that requires top-down attention and give rise to consciousness. Although, as I said here, David Soto and the people have reported 10 years ago that there's potentially unconscious working memory. And here, things that are invisible, still you can remember and then manipulate and then report later, which is very, very weird kind of finding, but it has been replicated several times. And here, I suppose that the requirement of the top-down attention is probably still the case. All right. And then the other diagonal is this non-necessary giving rise to consciousness or can occur without top-down attention. And here, for example, if you suppress the stimulus so that you cannot see the stimulus, still you can do this kind of stuff like after image or rapid visual processing and zombie behaviors according to Crick and Koch, and also primitive information of the storage or local weak integration. So these are also not super controversial. And then what's controversial starts to happen here. Things that does not give rise to consciousness, but still requires top-down attention. So for example, pop out in the visual search or priming, adaptation, object processing, visual search thoughts, and eye of origin. these are the kinds of the things that has been demonstrated in the past that can occur without conscious perception of the things. However, without paying attention to these invisible things, we can't measure even neuronal effects or behavioral effects. And this is just a sample of the like 20 papers that showed this kind of stuff. But I kind of gave up taking all these notes or reading all these papers, replicating all these effects. But my point about this is that it's mostly settled that many psychophysicists and also neuroscientists have looked at this kind of phenomena that starting from the end of last century, and it seems it's more or less the case that even though you don't see things clearly or at all, using a different kind of suppression technique, when you pay attention to it, you see bigger effects of the unconscious processing, or maybe sometimes it's necessary to do that. And if you most people agree with that, but some philosopher like Christopher Moore or some people in Singapore or Taiwan seems to be disagreeing with this. So we'll be having a discussion session next week on YouTube. So if you are interested, please come there and then discuss. And then the final part of this controversial thing is this can occur without top-down attentional amplification, but still give rise to consciousness. That's the iconic or fragile memory or partial reportability and the gist animal face gender perception in the dual task. And this part is in fact most contentious, like Stan DeHaan, Sid Quider, Hakwon Lau, and Michael Cohen, Dennett, and so on have been saying that this is impossible. If you don't pay attention, you don't see it. Or if you may feel like you are seeing it, but it's not true. And I have been saying the opposite side together with Ned Block or Victor Lame and so on. And today I provide some further evidence towards that argument. So, for example, as a representative kind of opinion, I stole a figure from Stan DeHaan's review in 2006. This is very famous and influential paper. So he thinks that the bottom-up stimulus strengths can be either weak or sufficiently strong, and top-down attentional amplification can be absent or present. And the important thing for us is this part. So if you don't have attention here, attention absent, then things, weak one remains subliminal and the strong one remains pre-conscious, like the salient things in the change blindness stimulus and so on. And then if the attention is present, but the stimulus is weak, it's again subliminal. And if a strong stimulus is attentionally amplified, that's when things become conscious, and because it resonates with the global workspace. That's their theory. Okay. So then the next thing is this without attention can we see component. And here I'm going to talk about the dual task paradigm a little bit more. So dual task paradigm typically presents two types of a task. One of them is known to be very demanding and difficult to do with any combination of a task. So here, this is the letter search task among the 5 briefly presented and also rotated and masked stimuli. And then in the periphery, we might present some kind of discrimination task or a detection task. And here, this is the case of the red-green or green-red discrimination task. If you are asked to do only central task in this type of situation, we titrate the task so that you can do it only, let's say, 70% accuracy. And if you are also asked to do only periphery, again, you should be able to do it at the 70 or 80% accuracy. So in terms of task difficulty, percentage correct, it's both the same. And then the critical thing is that when you ask participants to do both at the same time, whether they can do the task without any compromise or not, that's the question. So this is the attention operating characteristic analysis proposed by George Sparling. So if you do the central task alone, this letter task alone, you can do it 70%. And if you do it only peripheral, you can do it 70%. And if the top-down attention is necessary, then doing central performance really, at the high accuracy, compromise the peripheral performance, and then it can, center around here or maybe along this, diagonal. If the top-down attention of the red-green disk is not necessary, then it will locate at the top right like this, and that's the kind of the task that's called the top-down attention unnecessary task. Okay. And then over the years of the studies, people have documented that there are many different kinds of tasks that can be done or not with or without attention. So for example, the color discrimination of its own can be done without attention, or orientation discrimination or conjunction, it's also possible. And if it's a letter discrimination in the periphery, but as long as it's upright cases, then they can be also done without attention amplification. And then this is a natural scene discrimination, and this is a face gender discrimination. All of these do not seem to be impaired while you are doing the dual task. On the other hand, these seemingly very simple tasks like red-green or green-red or rotated plus or L, rotated T or L, or different two different orientation of the rotation, or this face up or face down type stimuli. These are the cases where you need to pay attention to that, and then you need to sacrifice the performance of the central task. And in the next slide, I will focus today's rest of the talk. I'll feature these face gender task and also red-green disk task or letter task a bit. Letter task a little bit less actually. Okay. So before going to the results, I'll discuss a little bit about the dual task advantages and the disadvantages. Advantages of the dual task is that it can manipulate stimuli and also tasks with almost no changes in the sensory input. So this is actually quite a good advantage, because if you do the cueing task to manipulate attention, cue itself has to be different when you manipulate attention. Or if you manipulate attention in terms of the change blindness or inattentional blindness, you need to induce certain kind of situation by manipulating the stimulus itself. So your conclusion may not be easy to say that whether it depends on attention purely or some kind of interaction between attention and the stimuli. But a dual task, keeping the task and the stimuli are the same, but you can just change the attentional instruction. That is a strength. And also another interesting thing about the dual task is that it can be flexibly combined with the various components, because the core component is very simple. And I'm going to demonstrate that we have successfully combined it with a confidence rating or similarity rating in the next few slides. On the other hand, the disadvantage has been that it requires substantial training. Previously, most of the dual task performance needed to train the subjects on the central task and then peripheral task. And then when the performance gets stabilized, then they try to do the dual task. But the dual task itself gets, improved. And, while the dual task is improving, also, peripheral task or central task improves. So this kind of, things was very difficult. So when I was doing the PhD project, for example, I had to train subjects over 8 hours or 10 hours before their performance stabilizes. However, we recently combined a staircase method, which is very simple, but there is some kind of trick to make it work. And now we can shorten all these procedure substantially, so that we can remove the confound due to the training-induced unconscious processing and things like that. And in fact, my PhD student shortened the duration, reported in a READY study, which is 100%, into less than 5% using this staircase method. So this Julian Matthews task, starts with a letter task, and then letter task is masked by rotated F. And at the same time, we present the phase stimulus in the periphery, which is presented in an unexpected location. And then separately for the central and peripheral task, we use a quest staircase to manipulate the delay between the face and the mask, or letter and the mask for the letters, so that each of them is always 75%. And then we adjust that block by block so that the difficulty remains the same throughout 2-3 days. And then when it's a single task, central task, then we ask them to report it was same or different with a different level of the confidence with a single mouse click. So this allows us to get both discrimination performance with the confidence rating for both central and peripheral task with just a 2-click. It's very easy. And then if you do that, then basically in our this paper, which is linked, we show in the first experiment and the second experiment replicate the previous effect, meaning that gender discrimination is possible without attentional compromise, whereas the letter task and disk task is not compatible. You have to choose one of them to perform 70% in one of the tasks. However, in the one of the significant extensions that we did is the following experiment, because many reviewers or when we present this kind of result in the conference, people ask, oh yeah, you can do it because face attracts attention. And so to counter for that kind of criticism, we devised this task. So here we blended transparently red-green disk on top of the face, okay? And then we adjusted the alpha level, or meaning transparency, degree of the transparency of the disks and also face for each individual subject, so that everybody can do the disk task or face task when it's done as a peripheral task, 70% accuracy. And we also adjusted the mask duration separately so that both of them are as difficult as possible, 70% accuracy. And then central task is also again task so that it is roughly 70% accurate. And then under this condition, we asked, can subjects do the task simultaneously or not? And if you are saying that face task is possible to do because face attracts attention, then that means that because of the face attention attraction, red-green disk should also benefit the spatial attention or boost, and we should be able to do that. However, it turns out that in this case, subject first of all reports phenomenally that, oh yeah, I can actually do this only for face, but not the color. People basically reports that the color experience kind of melts or goes unclear, whereas the visibility of the face remains the same basically. So here's the objective task performance, and like the previous figure, this objective performance for the face aspect is more or less no compromise, whereas the disk aspect becomes almost chance. You have to choose one of them, and this is a visibility rating for the correct trials. That's a thick mark, and the incorrect trials, which is this weaker ones. And in both cases, basically the face and also central task can be confidently discriminated when you are correct, and incorrect, if it's incorrect, you can lower the confidence. But you cannot do that for the disk aspect. So here, if the people focus on the central task, then the horizontally there's a difference, but vertically there is no difference. And the metacognition accuracy was also again more or less intact for the face, but almost a chance for the disk aspect. So this basically says that it's not the spatial attention residual that goes into the face part that allows face to be discriminated without under the dual task performance. There is something inherently something about face aspect that doesn't require attentional amplification, but these arbitrary red-green things that requires attentional amplification. Okay. So that's the this part of things. And then next, I'll go quickly about given perceptual behavior, are there effects of attention the same on the consciousness? So here, what we use is EEG. But the question is, does seeing an object and attending to an object result in a similar increase in neural activity? And the tool that we use is a steady state visual evoked potentials in EEG. And this has been used in the binocular library in many studies before, and I'll just go quickly about that. So Matt Davidson, my previous PhD student, presented to the left eye or right eye, different frequency of the flickers. It's sinusoid here, but in reality, it's a kind of grating. And then green one is flickering slower, and red one is flickering very fast. And then percept flips, between the fast and the slow flickers. Okay, that's a binocular library. And combining with the EEG, we can use this EEG signal to decode, in a sense, which one participants are seeing online. So this is x-axis, the time from the button press, and then y-axis, the log SNR of the low frequency flicker. So when the participants are reporting that I'm seeing the low frequency, it's high, and then when it flips to high, it goes down. And then the opposite is true when it's when they are seeing high and then seeing the low, it switches. So you can see this kind of butterfly-like plot. This is very easy to replicate across the has been replicated by many subjects, many studies. But the problem of this type of the experiment is that button press reports confounds both seeing and attending. So this has prompted me and other colleagues to propose a so-called no-report paradigm. And if you're interested, I would recommend you to read some of these papers, but that's not a focus today. We wanted to disentangle or dissociate seeing from attending. And the way we did is remember the motion-induced blindness. That kind of stimulus, here perceptual filling in, disappearance is known to increase when you pay attention. Okay, it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the type of the property that we want to exploit. And then using this property, what we asked was, does Ssvp amplitude increase with seeing and or attending to the flickering and fading stimuli? So this is kind of a complicated question, but if using filling in stimulus decreases visibility, it disappears, then if Ssvp amplitude is reflecting conscious seeing, it should go down, right? But if subjects are paying attention to it, then attention also increases disappearance. And so if Ssvp is tracking attention, then it should actually increase despite it goes invisible. So it's a kind of complicated hypothesis, but that's what we tried to do. And here is what we reported last year. So the display looks like this. The background of the display is flickering at 20 hertz. And then there are 4 blue-like spots on the display, and the subjects are reporting its visibility using four fingers, which is not that difficult. And then each of them are flickering at 15 hertz. And then we also included this phenomenally matched disappearance. Physically, we removed these 3 things gradually. And then people do not notice that it was we who removed this stimuli, but experience basically the same kind of disappearance. And then we use again staircase kind of method to adjust the size and also eccentricity of the stimulus. Closer to the fovea to make the Ssvp bigger, but farther enough to disappear as often as possible. That was very critical for our innovation. And then if you do that psychophysically over 1 minute, people can report the visibility with 4 fingers relatively accurately. And then including this catch trial, we removed the subjects who couldn't do that, and then we found that most of the subjects can do report of this task very accurately. Okay, so here's the critical results. So the critical result of y-axis here is the SNR, or strength of the signal, related to the flickering target stimulus. So this blue patches flickering at 15 hertz. And then if the 0 is the time of the disappearance report, it goes down as you expect. And by the way, it's kind of smoothed out because we use a relatively long time window to compute this thing. That is a disadvantage of Ssvp, but that's unavoidable. And then the reappearance, as the number of the patch increases physically, then it increases, which is totally as expected, right? And there's nothing about attention or consciousness. That's just as physical stimulus should behave. However, when we align the response with respect to the button press at 0, then something really weird happened. So at the 0, subjects are reporting the target either disappeared, which is these blue things, disappeared, but it's increasing here. And then it's reappearing, but it's more or less flat. So this increase, when the subject is pressing the button to report that it is disappearing, is very interesting. And it doesn't go with the interpretation that Ssvp is actually reflecting the conscious seeing, but it is consistent with Ssvp corresponding to strength of the attention. And here's the amount of the disappearance versus perceptual phenomenal disappearance. And as you see, if the things disappear more, then it goes down physically. But as a perceptual feeling in increases, it's moderately increasing. Okay, and I'll skip this, but here's another evidence to show that at the time of the disappearance, so-called evoked alpha amplitude in the occipital cortex actually decrease, which is a sign that the people's attention transiently increase around the time of the disappearance. So to sum up the two parts of our empirical study, I would say that without ascension, can we see? I say yes, for some stimuli like faces can be consciously seen without attentional amplification under the dual task. For a given perceptual behavior, are there effects of attention the same as the effects of being conscious of? And it's no. Ssvp tracks attention, but not consciousness. So it's not the case that those two things are always acting the same way and affecting on the neural activity. Okay, it's not. So for the rest of roughly 8 minutes or so, I'll just give you a little bit of the future outlook of my proposal. So I've been proposing for roughly 5 years or so that to move ahead to understand the physical base of consciousness, we should do the following. One is that first to characterize the structure of a qualia, and in this case, like psychophysics, and then also measure the neural activity like Ssvp, and then extract some kind of neural correlates of consciousness in terms of structure, and then finally to characterize the correspondence between them. If it's just a single point, it corresponds to the standard neural correlates of consciousness type approach, but we are proposing it to do it at the level of a structure. And I'll give you a bit more detail later. And then here in this program, I claim that attentional manipulation can be an effective way to perturb the structure of both qualia and brain activity so that it can be used to further sharpen our query or theory of consciousness. So as one step towards this experiment, what we have been doing is a dual task combined with a similarity rating to characterize the structure of perception. So here we use letters and the disc and the faces with different kind of rotation and so on. So that's a very different kind of manipulation than the two alternative dual task situation, right? And then instead of presenting one stimulus, we always presented two stimulus at a time, and then ask the people to make a central task as same difference kind of judgment, as well as a peripheral similar dissimilar judgment as well. This is a continuous rating from 4 3 to 1 to 1 2 3 4. And then if you do that without any attentional distraction, just paying attention to the peripheral two things at the same time, then the disks, for example, people can report similarity or dissimilarity very well. The blue indicates similarity judgment, similar, like -4 judgment, and red one corresponds to dissimilar, +4 judgments. And then if you use, if you know sort of dimensional reduction techniques such as multi-dimensional scaling, you see this type of the really nice shape of the ring corresponding to different degree of the orientation change. On the other hand, if you use faces, then females, different female faces are rated as similar, and the males are rated as similar, except for this one guy. And then female and male tend to be reported as dissimilar. And then if you do the multidimensional scaling, there is a two clear separation. And if you do the same experiment under the dual task situation, here's what you find. So first of all, similarity rating matrix becomes completely disorganized for the disks, but retained for the faces. And if you do the multidimensional scaling, you see the collapse of the structure. It used to be a nice ring, but it's now collapsed into something weird. Whereas faces, this guy used to be on this side here, but now it's moved towards a female. But more or less, male-female clustering is retained. So this is what I call as a sort of a structure of the perception in this way. It's nice. It's forming a nice ring kind of structure depending on the orientation, which collapse here, whereas faces are separated with or without attention based on the genders. And if you towards sort of the future goal of connecting this type of structure into information structure extracted from the brain, we need some more mathematical tools. And one of the tools to quantify this type of shape or structure of similarity is so-called topological data analysis. It's not super difficult, but the idea here is that you just grow each of the dots in this kind of space, and then when it's connected, we consider it as a line, and then if it's connected to make a whole, then it is called considered as a whole. And then when you make this radius of the ball too large, then it becomes again kind of clustered into one thing. So this as a function of the radius of the ball, you can characterize this geometry of this thing. Geometry of this, proposal, the similarity rating as a nice ring from here to here. On the other hand, the faces are clustered like this, and then when it's too connected, then it gets into one. So that's also one way to characterize this topology. And here is the attention absent type kind of topological data analysis. And this one means that there is barely holes here for the rings, disks, and structure of the face remains more or less the same. And then we can do nice statistics and also mathematical analysis here. And we hope to do something corresponding at the level of the neuronal activity or informational structure in the future. So what I have done so far about this particular type proposed level of the project is first as a first step, I tried to characterize the structure of the qualia using many different kinds of stimuli, unlike previous study using just two stimulus at the time to do the discrimination, but use a bunch of the stimulus to use a similarity rating, and then to construct or extract the structure, mathematical structure underlying this perception. And then in the future to do the brain recording and then extract the information structure to see whether they are corresponding in terms of mathematical property. That's the kind of the future goal. Okay. I'll finish here, and then this is our lab's current member and the previous PhD student who contributed to many of the projects I presented today, especially Matt and Julian and Elise. And that's it. Thank you. And I can take question if there's any. Yeah, Dominic. Did you raise a hand?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thank you now for a great talk. My question is about the use of the dual task, because it seems that we're talking about attention as an all or none phenomenon when it really is graded. So some stimuli might need very little attention and others more attention. And when people think, I think about consciousness without attention, I think that it means without no attention at all. And it's very difficult to get the situation, excepting the inattentional blindness, where, for instance, the very old studies by Mack and Rock showed that you can have a dual task in which on one trial, you're not expecting a question about something in the periphery, and you're unable to report it, although when you do report it on the second or third try, because you're not surprised anymore, you have no decrement in the performance in the central task. So some processes might take so little attention that when you have the intention to attend, you cannot see the decrement in a dual task situation. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so thanks for the comment. And first of all, so you said a lot of things, but
you're muted. No, you're muted.
yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks for the comments. You raised a couple of comments, and so I'll just say one at a time. First of the thing is that you suggested that attention is not an all or none. I totally agree with that. And but having said that, this dual task T and L tasks that we use here, as long as you use this type of the task that I categorize here, any combination of tasks in the bottom row, you just can't do it at the same time, and that seems to suggest that that is pretty much exhausting all available attention. That's the sort of the idea that Joachim Brand has been proposing. Whether I agree or not, that's kind of separate question. But I would say that empirically speaking, there is also a graded kind of stimulus, such as inverted upright version of faces, for example. There, if you use that kind of stimulus, then these face stimulus tend to fall in between this top-down attention unnecessary or top-down attention necessary. That's a relatively rare type of the situation reported in the literature, but in many cases, it's relatively clear that it's either completely compatible or not. So that's empirical kind of evidence of whether attention requirement is discrete or really more gradual. And then about the second point that you made was about the inattentional blindness being almost like perfect kind of situation of no attention, right? But I would disagree with that for several reasons. One is that inattentional blindness, I think it's more to do with expectation. And it's not really about attention. And expectation and attention, is something that we have been studying as a sort of the neural correlates, and also, psychologically, also probably different things. And one clear things about expectation is that by strongly expecting not to see something, it seems it's possible to kill almost any kind of a stimulus. And that's probably very different kind of the mechanism than the attentional amplification that we have been talking. It's more to do with the suppression or inhibition of anything that you don't expect. And practically, I don't know whether this, there is a really clear difference between attention and expectation, but we have published one paper at least saying that finding expectation operates really early in the processing, whereas attention kind of gradually amplifies the signal over the pathway. So that's a second point, and I think that was my answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Rashida or Igor? Should I take?
It was great.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi,
Yes.
it was a great talk. I'm a
Thank you.
student over here in Hyderabad, University of Hyderabad, from School of Medical Sciences and Optometry and Vision Sciences. And I have a question for you. Like, you are talking about attention and all. So, like in cases of non-strabismic binocular vision anomalies, like in cases of convergence and all, like they as a practitioner, I think that's the better way of treating by vision therapy. The better way of treatment is vision therapy. So like so many children, it is recommended in an article, like if there is any children who are having convergent issues and all, they should be tested for attention. Have you ever across something like that? Because in our country, I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah, what to say, but so you are suggesting, you're asking me whether I encountered the sort of clinical treatment of the convergence issue of the eyes.
Exactly. Of the eyes, like in cases of abnormalities of the convergence. So
Yeah,
we give vision therapy. Vision
yeah, I
therapy,
don't know.
we need so many stimulus kind of things will be given to them. And like,
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah,
do you
that's
test for
sorry.
attention thing?
Yeah, that's not my area of the research, so I don't know.
Okay. I'm
I
so
can't
sorry.
really
I'm
say.
so sorry.
Yeah.
I thought like, yeah, I'm thinking it from the perception point of view. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Igor.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So kind of almost a follow-up to Dominic's question, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I actually presented this paper on the face discrimination to a journal club at National University of Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And some students had this question, and it's been haunting me ever since. That how do you know that a specific task is measuring, say, consciousness? So you're withdrawing attention in a dual task paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Presumably attention, right? And not
Yeah.
consciousness. You're not touching consciousness with a dual task paradigm, presumably, right? So how do you know? And that's an assumption to make. And another assumption is, how do you know that what you're measuring in the periphery is truly a consciousness task? So I'm asking this because in a pure scenario, say, if you're measuring binocular rivalry, for example, either behaviorally or neurally, if you withdraw attention, it disappears. It's as if there are no stimuli there, just the binocular rivalry ceases. So to me, it seems that there are some tasks that are more targeting specifically consciousness than, say, a peripheral task. So could you address that?
Okay, so about the first component of your question was what we are actually measuring in this dual task, right?
Yeah.
And I would rephrase that as first of all, the dual task, the original kind of the dual task is like in this figure, measures only performance. Okay, performance, how accurately you can do the central task, and then how accurately you can do the peripheral task. So that's a really measure of the accuracy. Accuracy can be a reflection of the consciousness or a reflection of the attention. We don't know, okay? But what the dual task design is manipulating is the attentional availability, okay? Right? So when you are doing the central task, then your attention is fully available to the central task. And if you are doing the both things, then your attention may be compromised in terms of the availability for the spread in terms of the peripheral task or central task. So that what we are manipulating is attentional availability, but we are not still yet measuring. And here with this task design, critical innovation for us, thanks for asking, is that we went over this performance actually by asking subjects to rate the confidence rating. So here, subjects are making the central task decision, either all of the 5 letters the same or not as S or D here, but also rated the confidence from 1 to 4 for each side. And in the study of the unconscious perception literature, it has been repeatedly established that if you don't see the stimulus, then your confidence rating becomes just random. So when you are correct, you can be low confidence, and when you are incorrect, you can rate high confidence. If you are forced to rate all of this confidence rating, but only when you consciously see things, you can actually correlate your correct performance with the high confidence and your inaccurate trial with low confidence, especially at the threshold level. And that's the measure that we have emphasized in this slide on the right side, which is the confidence or visibility per se, okay, and also the metacognition. The metacognition is in a sense, the degree of the correlation between your correct accuracy together with the confidence. And that is, I would say that is not a perfect measure of the consciousness, but it guarantees that it is something that subjects are seeing consciously. If the metacognition becomes like here, then we don't know whether they are doing it by a hunch or just kind of random performance. But it seems like above chance for both, and then there's almost no decrement in terms of dual task. Therefore, I say that it is consciously seeing it. And also together, more important thing is that subjects report by self-report that they see it really clearly. Face aspect, but not the color aspect. You probably have to do it by yourself to believe this phenomenology, but I did it by myself and it was really clear. Color just kind of becomes unclear, really, but a face is still there.
Well, it could be a property of attention, right? So you could say, for example, that my availability of attention makes my attention unavailable for the periphery. So if you consider, say, attention back and forth from center to periphery to try and perform both tasks at the same time,
but remember,
you could say that what is being measured in the periphery is still attention.
But remember that we actually superimpose the face and the color there at the same time, and then if you are back and forth, why do we only see face but not the color of the disk?
The difficulty of the task is different.
But the difficulty of the task is equated at 70% for all of them.
That's right, initially, but the decrement may not be evenly distributed.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm claiming, right? Different stimulus, a different task. In this case, it's a phenomenology. It's dependent on the attention differently. I'm not saying that attention without consciousness is always there for all the stimulus. Right. Some specific kind of the specific stimulus does not seem to depend on attention. It's sort of answering to your last part of the question, right? You said that the rivalry seems to depend more attention but than the other things, but something like that, face, that I think it's eventually something to do with the neurophysiology of the faces. Face areas are so efficient and so extensive that if there's something like face, it starts to become really active efficiently, and you don't need any top-down attentional amplification. However, any kind of artificial stimulus like this red-green disc or TL things or rotated disc, which you do not have a dedicated cortical resource, you need to amplify it via attention.
Binocular rivalry is a very early phenomenon, perceptually speaking, from what
it
what
also
the
depends
literature
on the type
says.
of the stimuli.
And according to Blake, like if you withdraw attention, rivalry just disappears. There's nothing there. Just no competition, perceptual competition.
Yeah, but that's also dependent on the stimuli. I would say, in our hands, when we tried, using the bigger stimulus with the faces or houses, we can still see kind of a library without, attention as well. If it's a GABA patch, it starts to become like melting. I totally agree. Or color library, it also starts to melt. But it, really depends on the stimuli, I would say. But we haven't published it properly, so it's a future project.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other question, or that's pretty much it for the time? Yep. It's 10:30 for me in Australia, so I may go to take a rest. But
Okay.
yeah, hope that
So,
you guys do.
I think we had a very interesting lecture, and the following discussions. There could be more, but we have to keep time in mind. And we thank Professor, if there are no other questions or comments, Professor Tsuchiya for this wonderful review of his work on links between attention and consciousness. So now, Vaishnavi,
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
For the next speaker, you can move on.
We have a break for 10 minutes, and
we have a break of 10 minutes, virtual break. So yeah, we can come back after 10 minutes, and we get going with the next speaker.
Thank you.